Studios. Hi, this is Scott Gamble with Gamble Productions in Columbia, Alabama, and right here in the Crescent City of New Orleans. And today it's my great pleasure to have my friend from long ago. If you were able to catch the interview about 8 years ago when we interviewed this gentleman at Jazzology, then you were in for a treat, because those videos no longer exist. At a crash on my hard drive, I lost everything. So we're going to redo the interview and kind of give you an oversight as to who this gentleman is. And without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you this afternoon, right here in the Crescent City, Jamie Wight. This is Jamie, and Jamie actually got me involved in early blues and early jazz. I'll have all of that written at the end of the interview so that you can kind of see sort of what real musicians, and I say real musicians, do here in New Orleans, because I think there's a misnomer that a lot of people think that these musicians are up and mighty. They're something that that they're not, and that's just that they're human beings, and they're very, very kind. If you have an interest in their music, and well, whether or not that you do or not, but if you have an interest, they will help you. Is my point. So I had an interest in early blues and in jazz, and I was told that George Buck was the starting place to go find information, and finding Jazzology, I found Jamie Wight, and so we're going to just kind of get transitioned into that interview. So Jamie, tell our listeners about Jamie Wight. How old were you when you first got started in music? You've been playing what now for 40-something years, so there had to be a starting point. So tell me about that.
Well, there was always a lot of music around our house. We had music playing all the time. I remember listening to a lot of Eddie Arnold and Jim Reeves and Patsy Cline, big band music. Louis Armstrong. My dad was a Bobby Darin fan and Frank Sinatra fan. Louis Armstrong. Anyway, my dad played piano by ear, only for his own amusement. His father had a ragtime band back around 1900, so evidently there's something going on there in the blood. Anyway, I started learning how to play with a little Magnus chord organ that they don't make anymore, I'm sure, but it had a fan blowing through it, and you could push the keys down, and it had buttons to play the chords, major and minor chords. And that's how I learned how to play my chords. Wow. So I do more chord work on my right hand than I do on my left hand.
And about how old were you then?
I was probably about 8 years old.
Wow.
I'm guessing, maybe a little younger. I had an aunt show me where middle C was, and that was pretty much it. And then I just started learning tunes and figuring out the chords, and went from there. Took trombone lessons when I was in 5th grade. And then moved on to tuba in the 8th grade, and continued playing a little trombone in the orchestra and tuba in the band. And then I majored on tuba at the University of Toledo.
Wow.
So I continued with that. And then in the about 1971 or so, 72, I started playing more on the cornet, so I could kind of start leading my own band.
Master it.
Yeah. So I've been around the whole thing, the whole bandstand more or less. And when I moved to Toledo, I started meeting musicians there, the traditional jazz musicians, and learned from them. And then I eventually went up to Detroit to hear the concerts. They had a monthly concert program with the Detroit Jazz Society. They bring people like Wild Bill Davison, Art Oldies, people like that, Barrett Deems. So I got a chance to go up there and meet all those guys and listen to them. That's pretty much how I started. Then I just started working with the local bands and went from there.
Well, I don't want to be rude, but I think you're being very modest, because you play a lot of instruments and you've been around a lot in the music industry, and I think there's a lot of it that you may have left out, but I wish there was a biography or something on you as to all of your listings. I know that your involvement with Jazzology really helped with your denotation of history in jazz and blues. And now that you've got 8 grandchildren,
Right.
now you're leaving something to them, a legacy. I think you do.
I suppose. It's more about what I've learned doing the music and traveling around a lot. You know, getting over to China and Japan and South America, and things I've learned on all those travels that I think is even more important than the music itself. It's just the experiences.
Tell me a little bit about the best experience overseas.
Wow. I don't know, there's so many of them. I know that when I was in Hong Kong for the handover, that was pretty good. I went by myself, and they had a band over there made up of Filipino musicians that could do anything. And I'm thinking, I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to stick to the basics, play the Bill Bailey type tunes and the standard stuff. And when I got over there, those guys could play, they could switch around from every instrument, they could do the traditional stuff, they could sing like the 4 freshmen. And any tune I wanted to call, they knew it already. I was kind of dumbfounded on that one, but it was a great experience. And I was there for about 3 weeks, and then I got, they gave me a can of English air that they canned up before the handover, so people could still have English air in Hong Kong. We still have that someplace. And it was just a great experience, and it didn't have to work too much. I was treated like a special guest. They had Cuban cigar night. Oh, you don't have to play. You go up and smoke Cuban cigars and drink bourbon and watch fireworks. Okay.
That's what you did.
That's what I did. That was a good time.
So what was your favorite or your best memory of your early years? Did you meet Dizzy Gillespie, or did you meet Fats Domino by chance? Or?
No. One of the first guys, well, I've met several of the old timers. In fact, I had some of the old timers working with my band. Ted Merriweather was born in 1908.
Wow.
And he worked with my band for several years. He was a roommate with Teddy Wilson at Tuskegee.
Wow.
George Allen was a drummer and a flight instructor at Tuskegee. He was born in 1910. And he, drummer all his life, grew up around Pittsburgh, Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and worked across the street from Lawrence Welk at one time when Lawrence Welk was just starting off. And then there were a lot of guys like that, and fortunately I got a chance to record these guys with my band because they had never recorded before.
Sure, yeah.
Or very rarely had that chance. So that kind of important to me that I got a chance to do that. And I learned more from those guys than anybody. And then when I started meeting people like Wild Bill Davison, that was a kick. You just sit there and kind of awe. And then years later I brought him in and he did a little tour with my band, which we recorded everything and put on video. I never really put it out, but that was a learning experience.
Man, what an archive that would be to go back and look at those.
But then there's so many. There was Bill Roper, who had worked with Louis Armstrong, Kid Ory's band out the West Coast. There was Dave Wilborn, who was with the McKinney's Cotton Pickers, but back in the 20s was with that band out of Detroit. Recordings, the later one, Don Redman's band. He worked on banjo guitar with Don Redman's band way back in the 20s. And a lot of these guys, I didn't know their history when they were working with me. They came and they used to just come in and be the vocalist for a job or something like that, you know, the old guys. But yeah, I don't know.
And the only reason I know these people by name is because you introduced me to them. If you remember that one day, I was at Jazzology and I got a couple of books and some magazines, and I started reading. I think if you have an interest in something, that you'll do overkill trying to learn.
Absolutely.
Try to learn.
Yeah, it's easy to learn about something you're interested in.
Yeah, sure it is, you know. And so I'm going to be remiss, very remiss, if I don't ask you how the history of the Joy Makers started. Or if there was a band earlier that you led, I'd like to know about that. But especially, I know about the Joy Makers because you introduced me to them.
Right. Well, I started them about 1975 or 6. I can't even remember now. Anyway, and I had been working with another local band up in Toledo, and then I just wanted to start doing my own thing. I wasn't getting enough work with them, and so I just found a little restaurant, a club, and we started playing some gigs, and I started doing what I thought I wanted to do, more of a little different style. It's more comparable to, I don't know if you want to say Preservation Hall, but or Punk Johnson, but it's more the 40s revitalization of jazz, what was coming along in the 40s, and more of not as much arrangements as playing from your head and your heart. A little bit more laid back and more spontaneous, I guess, and mostly dance music, and we get excited, but you know, working together more as a group, as opposed to being a bunch of soloists.
Right.
Making a groove, you know, more about a groove than individual notes. That's the best way I can describe it. And then when I first started coming down to New Orleans and I started hearing some of the old guys, I felt like I was on the right track. You know,
You'd come home.
Yeah, exactly. I felt like, well, I'm doing what I want to do, and evidently there's a lot of other people that have been doing the same thing, so.
Well, I don't want to switch gears because the interview is definitely about you, but I think that I'd like to know a little bit about George Buck's involvement in your life. Did he help you at all in your career, or?
In a funny way, he did. One of the first times I came down to New Orleans, I met a record producer by the name of Leonard Brackett from Salisbury, North Carolina. And he had recorded with his partner a lot of the older musicians like Jim Robinson and George Lewis and those people. Anyway, I met up with him, and I had my album with me, my brand new album that I recorded, just to give it away to people or show them what I'm from up in Ohio, just what I've been doing. Anyway, he took me over to meet George Buck. George listened to the album and decided he was going to buy it. He was going to buy the rights to it. And by that time, I wasn't selling too many albums because cassette tapes came out. And I had already put a couple hundred on cassette tape. And then by the time I started selling those, CDs were coming out. So George bought that album, and I think he paid about $2,500 for it, the rights to it, which was pretty good. And I remember,
it was.
Yeah, when I got home, my wife told me, she said, "You need to go down there more often." You came back with all that money in your pocket. And then George sat on it for about 10 years, and by the time he was ready to do something with it, he said, "Well, it's not long enough. There's not enough tunes on there for a CD." So then I sold him 3 more tunes off of another recording I did, and then finally came out as a CD.
Is that the one that I have?
It's called Spreading Joy.
Yes, Spreading Joy.
Yeah. That was my first one that I produced with my own band.
We're going to shift just a little bit and bring our young listeners in on this too, because I think it's important, as we've talked about it in the past, that we need to spread this this information, this art. I was about to call it a craft, but I don't know if it's even that. But anyway, we need to spread this to our young people too, so that they can understand. And I think the best question that I've been asked around, what is the difference in blues and jazz?
Well, I would say that blues is is an element of jazz.
It's an element.
It's an element. Blues is its own thing. The standard blues is 12 bars, 3 chords, and then you can do a variation on that, but it's very standard, format. But the blues also is take a major chord, but you flat the 3rd against it, flat the 7th, which is what makes it a blues sound. The format's one thing, but then the actual notes that you use while playing the blues, flatten the 3rd and 7th, and a few other things that you do. That is like one of the main ingredients to the traditional jazz that I play. And it's as important as the melody or whatever else goes along with it, the rhythm.
Then you have improvisation and
right.
go along.
But it's always have to do that, but to me that's the key element.
You don't have to stop there. You can go.
I don't
go on.
Well,
how would you explain to your grandchildren what the difference in blues and jazz is? Just like that?
Pretty much.
Or by example?
I would just say that blues is just it's kind of its own thing, but then it's part of what makes jazz, along with the spiritual type of chord progressions and things that marching band music. It all is kind of thrown
two entities all together, but they're one.
Yeah, and it's just a combination of so many different things. But like I say, and of course the improvisation is a key too. If you don't have that, it's not really jazz because it's all written out. Everybody's going to do it the same way.
Right. Right. Well, there's no doubt that you're very prolific. You've got it going on in the world of music. How many concerts would you say you do a year? The Royal Court, is that right? Palm Court.
Palm Court used to be there, yeah.
And
when they were open.
When they were open. I can take that. They're closed because of COVID.
They're supposed to open in September.
Well, that'll be great.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. So how many concerts do you do a year?
Well, of course, I haven't done any for quite a while. But when I started off, I had my band up in Ohio. We were on the Ohio Arts Council touring roster. We were the only jazz band on that program.
Wow, interesting.
So that was the first time I actually went around and started doing concerts. And we did a lot of colleges, theaters, schools, that type of thing. And some of it was like a history of jazz sort of thing.
Right.
And give them a little background and, play blues and then show how the blues fits into a standard type of a pop song.
Sure.
The different way you can play it straight, or then you kind of jazz it up, blues it up, whatever you call it, and show the difference. And so that was the first that I started doing that on a regular basis. And even after I moved down to New Orleans, I kept that band together up there and kept it on the roster. So I would fly back, and as long as I had Ohio musicians, I could stay on that for a while. Until it didn't make sense to be going back and forth because I was doing more down here.
You're doing here.
Yeah. And then once I got down here too, I started with different bands. It was different, but I started doing cruises through the Panama Canal.
Oh wow!
Like I said, I went to Hong Kong and Japan, and with different groups. And when I was with the Dukes of Dixieland, it seemed like every couple of days we were hopping on an airplane and going to a concert somewhere. So probably, I don't know, maybe up to 100 concerts a year, and then flying right back the next morning to play on the boat at night, back on the Natchez. So that was a little rough.
I was going to say that must have been a killer on you.
Yeah, it was a killer. It's better when you go somewhere and you're play a few times and you get a whole week. Bermuda was like, we went to Bermuda, had a couple of shows and we were there all week. I said, now that's what I'm talking about.
Just relax now.
Yeah.
Your biggest accomplishment in the world of jazz and blues, what would you say yours is?
I feel like my biggest accomplishment was bringing a bunch of the old guys that were not really doing it professionally. They were doing a little bit of it, but they weren't, with an organized band, actually doing concerts and recording. And I brought a bunch of older fellas, like from Detroit, Battle Creek, Cleveland. I brought them all together, and we started doing these concerts and working regular jobs,
giving them a home.
And we found our groove, and we had a lot of fun, and we were all on the same page. And then to be able to do that with the old timers, and a lot of them, a few of them that are still alive, still say they still owe me, although I feel completely the opposite way about it because they did so much for me. But they feel like I brought them into the serious world of jazz.
And I think that they're right in saying so.
And especially with the old timers that hadn't ever recorded, and I got them. You know, I got them on tape, I got them on LP, and so they're there forever. They're not going to go, you know.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Just like this video, it'll be here 2,000 years
boy.
from now. Welcome to my world.
I don't know what to say about all that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I know, thanking you, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you for your involvement in my life and starting me, because I mean, I knew who Ma Rainey was, but I'd never listened to her 2 CD record. I would never just sit down and listen to it and make myself listen to it and understand what was going on in the song. And I would never have Art Rhodes. Am I right?
Art Rhodes.
Rhodes.
Yeah.
Rhodes. I would never have listened to his music because I didn't know who he was. By you bringing me into the, you know, to the limelight of these people who I guess had gotten forgotten in the North, and you brought them down here to New Orleans to get recognized. I think that's a great accomplishment, Jamie. I really did.
Okay.
What?
Well, I had a recording session a few years back, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, with Charlie DeVore, a trumpet player from up in Minnesota. And I put a session around him, and what I did, I just did a lot of the musicians that come in every year for the festival season that all kind of work together. I invited them to come in and out of the studio as different little groups and changing personnel throughout the day. So we spent a day just recording tunes that we were familiar with, and that just to get them all on tape with the different personalities, changing around a little bit. Some local fellas were on it. Lars played a couple numbers on piano. I played piano on some of it. I took over for Charlie and played a little bit of cornet. And then we did a couple of cornet numbers together. I think we had 3 or 4 different piano players. We had 3 or 4 different bass players come through. Drummers. Frank Oxley was on drums, and my daughter played some drums. She played guitar. And so we switched it around quite a bit. Brian O'Connell played clarinet. Ryan Burridge, he played some clarinet. So we just kind of mixed it up, and we just selected a couple tunes and we went from there. And it was a great time. We ended up with a CD out of it. George Buck bought it. Or at that time, Lars Edegren bought it.
What is the name of that one?
That's Jamie Wight presents Charlie DeVore's New Orleans Band.
I'll have to see if I can find that. I don't know if I have that in my collection, or I may have it. I don't want to dwell on recording as much as I want to stay on track with your life in the blues and the jazz. But since I am in the recording, I would feel like I've lost a whole day if I didn't ask you this particular question. And I may have dreamt it, and I don't know what I'm talking about. But am I right in saying that George Buck had one of the first recording studios in New Orleans that was recording in stereo, or that recorded in stereo?
I know that he's got the oldest continuous jazz label that started, I think, in '49.
Wow.
Didn't start in New Orleans, though. It was in, I believe it was Georgia. That's where he opened up his first recording studio. I'm pretty sure. But one of his first recordings was Wild Bill Davison, and that one of his bands. And I think that was 1949, and he's been going on ever since, never stopped doing it. And then started buying different labels and adding to it, you know. He bought from Leonard Brackett, who I mentioned earlier. He bought a lot of stuff from Leonard Brackett, who had the Circle label. I believe that was his label, out of North Carolina. And then, of course, he bought the American music from Bill Russell. And just Southland was another one. But anyway, he's got 7 or 8 labels that he's in control of, along with his Jazzology and his GHB, which are his original 2 labels.
Were you ever able to record with him in New Orleans?
Yeah.
At his studio?
Yeah. Yeah, I've done a few things in that studio. Yeah.
Was that on Roll Street?
The only one I know about is above Jazzology right now. I don't know about anything else that he had here. I know that when he came down here in the 80s, he moved everything down here. They opened the Palm Court. They put the factory upstairs and the studio upstairs and bought a warehouse that they stored all kinds of stuff out in.
And you showed me that. You showed me the recording room.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty interesting to have all those people, famous people go in, celebrities go in at one time. It's almost like when you go to Philadelphia and you go to Gamble and Huff. Obviously, you're seeing a different genre of music, but you have the Temptations and and OJ's and all of those wonderful bands who recorded all there in that one room, and you just look at the history, or I do, and just marvel at the history that's.
Well, when you talk to Lars, you'll find everything out that I'm wrong about. He'll correct it. I know I'm close on a lot of that stuff.
No, I'd say you're right. We're going to keep it anyway. I know it's been a joy this afternoon to come into your wonderful home and spend some time with you, and I'll guarantee you there's nothing that's going to touch this video. Making sure that David's got a copy and myself, you'll have a hard copy of it too, so it'll last until until there is no more music. But for right now, I just thank you for your time and your ability to play and your professionalism, but yet you let down your professionalisal and was my friend.
Well, now I'm gonna give you a little lagniappe here.
Okay.
Because about a year and a half before this pandemic started, I had my mouth rebuilt. I was having a lot of trouble, and I was pretty much decided, well, I don't know if I'm going to get back into playing my horn or not. I could settle on playing some piano. I wasn't even ready to try. And then this pandemic came along, and there was absolutely nothing else to do. So I decided to get my horn out and see what I could do with it.
Can you play us a note?
A little, I don't know, but little by little, I whittled everything down to make everything fit right, and I'm feeling pretty confident about myself, getting ready to go back to it now. So, but it took me about a year to get those chops working right again. Get my tone back and be comfortable with it.
I'd be honored if you play us a tune before I left.
God, I don't know if I can handle that. Can we take a little break from that?
Yeah.
All right, since you're a blues man,
Okay.
I'll give you Louis Armstrong's Back to Town Blues.
All right.
This is a 12-bar, 3-chord blues. If I can get it out of this horn.
I think you can.
because I do. Early in the day.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. What a treat.
I usually get $12 for that.
I'll pay you when you take a check.
Yeah. Sure, why not?
Mr. White, thank you so much for your talent and your gift to blues and jazz. And I look forward to the next 8 years when we do the next interview.
Well, I hope so. We'll see what happens. Man, it could be good 8 years from now. Well, who would have known 2 years, 8 years ago, what we've been going through this year?
That's exactly right.
Unbelievable.
All right, this is Scott saying thanks for watching this afternoon.